then we'll also do a little of recap of everything. Okay, perfection of yoga, chapter 4. Yoga as body and mind control. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll say our quick pranam mantras before we read. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Ti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Okay, chapter 4. Yoga as body and mind control. Throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna was encouraging Arjuna to fight. For he was a warrior and fighting was his duty. Although Krishna delineates the meditational yoga system in the 6th chapter, he does not stress it or encourages Arjuna to pursue it as his path. Krishna admits that his meditational process is very difficult. So you remember last week what we were reading about control of mind, right? And how we were reading, Prabhupada puts the analogy like it's as, Arjuna puts that analogy that it's as difficult as controlling the wind. And then Krishna is saying by 2 things you can do, by practice and by detachment. Vairagya and Abhyasa and Vairagya. This was chapter 6. So we'll continue from there. What Prabhupada is saying here, that yes, it is difficult. Krishna admits that it is difficult. And this is what he's saying. By 2 things you can control the mind, or to slowly start bringing mind into some kind of practice order, and then gradually that leads into detachment. So Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Asamshayam Mahabaho Manodur Nigraham Cha Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kaunteya Vairagena Cha Grahayate. The Blessed Lord said, O mighty Arjun, O mighty son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by constant practice and by detachment. So 2 things, by practice and by detachment. Here Krishna emphasizes practice and renunciation as ways to control the mind. But what is that renunciation? Today, it is hardly possible for us to renounce anything, for we are so habituated to such variety of material sense pleasure, despite leading the life of uncontrolled senses indulge. We attend yoga classes and expect to attain success. There is so many rules and regulations involved in the proper execution of yoga, and most of us can hardly give up a simple habit like smoking. In his discourse on the meditational yoga system, Krishna proclaims that yoga cannot be properly performed by one who eats too much or eats too little. One who starves himself cannot properly perform yoga, nor can a person who eats more than required. The eating process should be moderate, just enough to keep the body and soul together. It should not be for the enjoyment of the tongue. When palatable dishes come before us, we are accustomed to take not just one of the preparations, but 2, 3, or 4, and upwards. Our tongue is never satisfied, but it is not unusual in India to see a yogi that only a small spoonful of rice a day and nothing more. Nor can one execute meditational yoga system If one sleeps too much or does not sleep sufficiently, Krishna does not say that there is such a thing as dreamless sleep. As soon as we go to sleep, we will have a dream, although we may not remember it. In the in Gita, Krishna cautious that one who dreams too much while sleeping cannot properly execute yoga. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily, nor can one infected by insomnia who cannot sleep at night successfully execute yoga, for the body must keep fit. Thus, Krishna outlines so many requirements for disciplining the body. Although these requirements, however, can essentially be broken down into four basic rules: no illicit sexual connection, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling. These are the four regulative principles Prabhupada has laid out. These are four minimum regulations for execution of any yoga system. And in the age who can refrain from these activities, we have to test ourselves according to a certain our success in yoga execution. Yogi yunjati satatam atmanam rahasi stitah ekaki yati chittatma nerashir aparigriha. The transcendentalist should always try to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Self. He should live alone in secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Bhagavad Gita 6.10. From this verse, we can understand that it is the duty of a yogi to always remain alone. Meditational yoga cannot be performed in an assembly, at least not according to Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so Prabhupada is what he's explaining and what Lord Krishna is explaining here. The process of meditational yoga, right? When we talk about yoga means like we talked about like meditation. So Prabhupada is clearly, laying down the foundation, like first of all, what yoga is to connect to the Lord. And this process of meditation, which is commonly understood as yoga, Prabhupada is pointing that it is very difficult. It has to be we cannot put that meditational yoga cannot be done in mass amount of people around. Body has to be fit. Person has to live a very disciplined life, not eating too much, not sleeping too much. So all these things Prabhupada is pointing that these are all, unless these things are in place, one cannot perform the meditational yoga. Okay. Who would like to read a little bit? Manohar, you want to read meditational yoga from here?
Okay. Meditational yoga cannot be performed in an assembly, at least not according to the Bhagavad Gita. In the meditational system, it is not possible to concentrate the mind upon the super so except in a secluded place. In India, there are still many yogis who assemble at the Kumbh Mela. Generally, they are in seclusion, but on rare occasions, they come to attend special functions. In India, there are still thousands of yogis and sages, and every 12 years or so, they meet in particular holy places, Allahabad, etc. Just as in America, they have businessmen's conventions. The yogi, in addition to live in a secluded place, should also be free from desires and should not think that he is performing yoga to achieve some material powers. Nor should he accept gifts or favors from people. If he is properly executing this meditational yoga, he stays alone in jungles, forests, or mountains and avoids society altogether. At all times he must be convinced for whom he has become a yogi. He does not consider himself alone because at all times the Paramatma Super Soul is with him. From this we can see that in modern civilization it is indeed very difficult to execute this meditational form of yoga properly. Contemporary civilization in the stage of Kali has actually made it possible for us to be alone, to be desireless, and to be poisonless. The method of executing meditational yoga is further explained in the considerable detail by Krishna to Arjuna. Sri Krishna says, Sutra Sutra Desha Pratisthapi Sthir Sthiram Ashanamatmanah Nati Utritam Nati Nicham चैलाग्नकुशोत्तमं तत्रैकाग्रमणा कृत्वा यथा चित्तेन्द्रियक्रिया उपविश्यासने युञ्ज्य yogam atmavishuddhaye. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay tusha grass on the ground and then cover it with deerskin and soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and should practice yoga by controlling the mind and the senses, purifying the heart and fixing the mind on one point. Bhagavad Gita 6.11 to 12.
Very nice, Manad. You can read. You can finish this.
Okay. Generally, yogis sit on tiger skin or deer skin because reptiles will not crawl on such skins to disturb their meditation. It seems that in God's creation, there is a use for everything. Every grass and herb has its use and serves some function, although we may not know what it is. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has made some provision whereby the yogi doesn't have to worry about snakes. Having acquired a good sitting place in a secluded environment, the yogi begins to purify the Atma, body, mind, and soul. The yogi should not think, now I will try to achieve some wonderful powers. Sometimes yogi do attain certain siddhis or powers, but these are not the purpose of yoga, and real yogis do not exhibit them. The real yogi thinks I am now contaminated by this material atmosphere, so now I must purify myself.
Very nice. Okay. Let's see. Who else? Jyotsna, you want to read further?
Okay, Mataji. I'm from We, right?
If we can quickly see.
Okay. If we can quickly see that controlling the mind and body is not such an easy thing, and that we cannot control them as easily as we can go to the store and purchase something, but Krishna indicates that these rules can be easily followed when we are in Krishna consciousness. Of course, everyone is motivated by sex life, but sex life is not actually discouraged. We have this material body, and as long as we have it, sex desire will be there. Similarly, as long as we have the body, we must eat to maintain it. We must sleep in order to give it rest. We cannot accept to negate these activities. But the um, Vedic literatures do give us guidelines for regulations in eating, sleeping, mating, etc. If we at all expect success in the yoga system, we cannot allow our unbridled senses to take us down the paths of sense objects. Therefore, guidelines are set up. Lord Sri Krishna is advising that the mind can be controlled through regulation. If we do not regulate our activities, our mind will be more and more agitated. It is not that activities are to be stopped, but regulated by the mind. Always engage in Krishna consciousness. Being always engaged in some activities connected with Krishna is actually samadhi. It is not that when one is in samadhi, he doesn't eat. wake, sleep, or enjoy himself in any way. Rather, samadhi can be defined as executing regulated activities while absorbing in the thought of Krishna. Asam, asamya, asamyatatmana yogo dusprapa iti me matihi vasyatmana tu yatata sakyo vaptum upayataha. For one whose mind is unbridled, Krishna further says, self-realization is difficult work. Bhagavad Gita 6.36. Everyone knows that an unbridled horse is dangerous to ride. He can go in any direction at any speed, and his rider is likely to come to some harm. Insofar as the mind is unbridled, Krishna agrees with Arjuna that the yoga system is very difficult work indeed. But, Krishna adds, he whose mind is controlled and strives by straight means is assured of success. That is my judgment. Bhagavad Gita 6.36. What is meant by strives by right means? One has to try following the four basic regulative principles as mentioned and execute his activities absorbed in Krishna consciousness. If one wants to engage in yoga at home, then he has to make certain that his other engagements are moderate. He cannot spend long hours of the day working hard to simply earn a livelihood. One should work very moderately, eat very moderately, gratify the senses very moderately, and keep his life as free from anxiety as possible. In this way, practice of yoga may be successful. What is the sign by which we can tell that one has attained perfection in yoga? Krishna indicates that one is situated in yoga when his consciousness is completely under his control. Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyeva vatistate nispraha sarva kamebhyo yukta ityuchyate tada. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. Bhagavad Gita 6.18.
Yeah, go ahead.
One who has attained yoga is not dependent on the dictations of his mind. Rather, the mind comes under his control, nor is the mind put out or extinguished. For it is the business of the yoga to think of Krishna or Vishnu. Always, the yogi cannot allow his mind to go out. This way around very difficult, but it is possible in Krishna consciousness. When one is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, in the service of Krishna, then how is it possible for the mind to wander away from Krishna? In the service of Krishna, the mind is automatically controlled.
Very nice. Thank you, Josna. Okay. Let's see who would like to read further.
Nihal?
Yes, go ahead, Nihal.
Nor should the yogi have any desire for material sense gratification. If one is in Krishna consciousness, he has no desire other than Krishna. If it is not possible to become desireless. The desire is for sense gratification. Must be overcome by the process of purification. But desire for Krishna should be cultivated. It is simply that we have to transfer the desire. There is no question of killing desire, for desire is the constant companion of the living entity. Krishna is a process by which the one purifies his desires. Instead of desiring so many things for sense gratification, one simply desires things for the service of Krishna. For example, we may desire palatable food, but instead of preparing foodstuffs for ourselves, we can prepare them from Krishna and offer them to him. It is not that the action is very different, but there is a transfer of consciousness from thinking of acting of for my senses to thinking or of acting for Krishna. We may prepare him nice milk products, vegetables, grains, fruits, and other vegetarian dishes for Krishna, and then offer them to him, praying. This material body is a lump of ignorance. In the senses are a network path leading to death. Of all, the tongue is the most ferocious and difficult to control. It is the very to conquer the tongue. So let us take this prasad to our full satisfaction and glory. Their lordships, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, and in love call for the help, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu. In this way, our karma is sacrificed. For not from for from the beginning, we are thinking that the food is being offered to Krishna. We should have no personal desires for the food. Krishna is so merciful, however, that he gives us the food to eat. In this way, our desire is fulfilled. When one has his molded life in such a way, dovetailing his desires to Krishna, then it is to be understood that he has attained perfection in yoga. Simply breathing deeply and doing some exercises is not yoga. As far as behind as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, a whole purification is required. In the execution of yoga, it is very important when the mind is agitated. Mataji, can you scroll down? यथा दीपो निवतस्तो निगते सोपमा स्मृतः योगिनी यत चितस्य युनगुणो yogam atmanah. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so does a transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled. It always remains steady in his meditation over the transcendental self. When a candle is in a windless place, its flame remains straight and does not waver. The mind, like the flame, is susceptible to many material desires. With the slightest agitation, it will move. A little movement of the mind can change the whole consciousness. Therefore, in India, one serious practicing yoga traditionally remained brahmachari or celibate. There are two kinds of brahmachari. One is complete celibate and the other is grahastha brahmachari. That is to say that he has a wife. He does not associate with any other woman, and his relations with his own wife are strictly regulated. In this way, either by complete celibacy, restricted sex life, one's mind is kept from being agitated. Yet, when one takes a vow to remain complete celibate, his mind may be still agitated by sexual desire. Therefore, in India, those practicing the traditional yoga under the strict vows of celibacy, they are not allowed to sit alone, even with a mother, sister, or daughter. The mind is so fickle that the slightest suggestion can create havoc. The yogi should have this mind. The yogi should have his mind trained in such a way that as soon as his mind wanders from meditation on Vishnu, he drags it back again. This requires a great deal of practice. One must come to know that his real happiness in experiencing the pleasure of his transcendental senses, not the material senses. Senses are not to be sacrificed, and desires are not to be sacrificed. But there are both desires and sense gratification and sense satisfaction in the supreme sphere. Real happiness is transcendental to material. Sensual experience, if one is not convinced of this, he would surely be agitated and will fall down. One should therefore know the happiness he is trying to derive from material senses is not really happiness.
Very nice. Thanks, Nihal. Very glad. You should read often. Okay. Okay, I'll read a little bit. Those who are actually yogis truly enjoy, but how do they enjoy? Ramante yogino nante. Remember, we had discussed this line. Ramante means, I had explained the meaning of the word Ramante, means Rama, comes from the root word Raman, which is actually the transcendental enjoyer. And who is Lord Ram? Ram is, and Lord Krishna, both are in that way. Lord Krishna is Radhika Raman, right? And Lord Ram is Ram, the supreme enjoyer, the reservoir of enjoyment. Now, Ramante Yogino Nante, their enjoyment is unlimited. That unlimited enjoyment is real happiness, and such happiness is spiritual, not material. This is real meaning of Rama. As we chant Hare Rama, Rama means enjoyment through spiritual life. Spiritual life is all pleasure, and Krishna is all pleasure. We do not have to sacrifice pleasure, but we do not have to enjoy it properly. But we do have to enjoy it properly. A diseased man cannot enjoy his life. His enjoyment of life is false enjoyment, but when he is cured and is healthy, then he is able to enjoy. Similarly, as long as we are in the material conception of life, we are not actually enjoying ourselves, but are simply becoming more and more entangled in the material nature. If a sick man is not supposed to eat, his eating unrestrictedly actually kills him. Similarly, the more we increase the material enjoyment, the more we become entangled in this world, and the more difficult it becomes to free from the material entrapment. All of the system of yoga are meant to disentangle the conditioned soul from this entrapment, to transfer him from the false enjoyment of material things to the actual enjoyment of Krishna consciousness. Sri Krishna says, Yatra Mate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatta chittatva nam pashyanatmani tushyati sukham maya atyantikay yatta buddhi grahayam atendriyam veti yatra na chaivyam sthitas chalati tatvata yam labdva cha param labham manyate nadhikam tata yasmin sthito na dukkhena guru napi vichilyate tadvidyad dukkha samyogan viyogam yoga samahitam. In the stage of perfection, called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self and pure mind, by the pure mind, and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. Upon gaining, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, he never shakens in the midst of the greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from the miseries arising from mental concoction. And I see so important point. One thing is very like we've seen also, like people who have come to Krishna consciousness, even if for sometimes they will get a little deviated, if at all, not generally devotees, but if at all, they would come and then they would not find any interest in it, but eventually they'll come back. So this is exactly what Lord is saying, that once he comes, he never departs, and he also feels that there is no greater gain. And slowly, gradually, we all feel like that. And in understanding in depth the Krishna consciousness, understanding who we are, our own real identity, our connection to Lord. If we understand, the supremacy of the Lord, then gradually, we understand, we understand how we are meant to bound to Him, instead of, entangling ourselves into this material world. And gradually, we start to realize that bond of love. And then slowly, as our hearts become purified, we just feel that, you know that's the last step, when we feel that there is no greater gain in this material world. And that's how gradually this detachment comes. But for that, we have to consistently, Prabhupada is telling that we have to follow these at least 4 regulative principles to begin even our journey back to Krishna. Okay, let's read a little more. We want to finish this chapter and as much as we can from the second. So let me read a little. One form of yoga may be difficult and another may be easy, but in all cases, one must purify his existence to conception of Krishna consciousness enjoyment. Then one will be happy. Yada hi nendriyartheshu na karmasva anusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga dharastadochate. Udharedatmanatmanam avasadyate atmaiva hi atmano bandhuratmaiva tripuratmana. A person is said to have attained yoga when, having renounced material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor for fruitive desires. A man must elevate himself by the mind, not degrade himself. The mind is a friend and a conditioned soul, is a friend of the conditioned soul, and his enemy as well. When we have to rise ourselves to the spiritual standard of ourselves. In this sense, I am my own friend and I am my own enemy. This opportunity is ours. There is a very nice verse by Chanakya Pandit who says, no one is anyone's friend, no one is anyone's enemy. It is only by the behavior that one can understand who is the friend and who is the enemy. One who is born our enemy and no one is born as our friend. These roles are determined by our mutual behavior. As we have dealings with others in ordinary affairs, in the same way, the individuals have dealings with himself. I may act as my own friend and as my own enemy. As a friend, I can understand my position as spiritual soul, seeing that somehow or other I have come into the contact with material nature, trying to get free from material entanglement by acting in such a way as to disentangle myself. In this case, I am my friend. But even after getting this opportunity, I do not take it. And then I should be considered my own worst enemy. Bandhuratmanastasya yathe yenatmanaivatmana jita atmanastu satrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. For those who have conquered mind, the mind is the best friend. For the one who has failed to do so, his mind will be the greatest enemy. How is it possible for one to become his own friend? This is explained here. Atma means mind, body, and soul. When we speak of Atma, in so far as we are in the bodily conception, we refer to it as a body. However, we are we transcend the bodily conception and rise to the mental concoction. Atma refers to the mind. But actually, when we are situated in true spiritual form, then Atma refers to the soul. In actually, we are pure spirit. In this way, according to the spiritual development, the meaning of Atma differs. For as far as Nirukti Vedic dictionary is concerned, Atma refers to body, mind, and soul. However, in verse Bhagavad Gita, Atma refers to mind. Okay, very nice. Who would like to read a little bit? If through the yoga, who else has not read? Omkar, you want to read?
Yes. If through yoga the mind can be trained, then mind is our friend. But if the mind is left untrained, then there is no possibility of leading a successful life. For one who has no idea of spiritual life, the mind is the enemy. If one thinks that he is simply the body, his mind will not be working for his benefit. It will simply be acting to serve the cross body and to further condition the living entity and entrap him in material nature. If, however, one understands one's position as spirit soul apart from the body, the mind can be a liberating factor. In itself, the mind has nothing to do. It is simply waiting to be trained, and it is best trained through association. Desire is the function of the mind. Known desires according to his association. So if the mind is to act as friend, there must be a good association. The best association is a sadhu, that is a Krishna consciousness person, for one who is striving for spiritual realization. There are those who are striving for temporary things, asat, matter, matter and the body are temporary, and if one only engages himself for bodily pleasure, he is conditioned by temporarily things. But if he engages himself in self-realization, then he is engaged in something permanent. Sat. Um, Obviously, if one is intelligent, he will associate with those who are trying to elevate themselves to the platform of self-realization through one of the various forms of yoga. The result will be that those who are sadhu realize we will be able to sever his attachment to material association. This is the great advantage of good association. For instance, Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna just to cut off his attachment to this material affection, because Arjuna is attracted to things that are impeding the execution of his own duty. Krishna severs these things. To cut something, a sharp instrument is required, and to cut the mind from its attachment, sharp words are often required. The sadhu or teacher shows no mercy in using sharp words to sever the student's mind from material attractions. By speaking the truth uncompromisingly, he is able to sever the bondage. For example, at the very he is actually fool number one. If we actually want detachment from his material body, we should be prepared to accept such cutting words from the spiritual master. Compromise and flattery have no effect, but strong words are required. In Bhagavad Gita, the material conception of life is condemned in so many places. One who thinks the country in which he is born is worshipable, or one who goes to holy places and yet ignores the sadhus there, is likened unto an ass, as an enemy is always thinking of doing harm, so the untrained mind will drag one deeper and deeper into material entanglement. Conditioned souls struggle very hard with the mind and with other senses. Since the mind directs the other senses, it is of utmost importance to make the mind the friend. चितात्मनः प्रसन्तस्य परमात्मा समाहितः शीतोष्णसुखदुःखेषु तथा मानापमानयोः. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached. For he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. By training the mind, one actually attains tranquility, for the mind is always dragging us over non-permanent things. Just as an unbridled horse will pull a chariot on a perilous course, although we are permanent and eternal, somehow or other we have become attracted to non-permanent things. But the mind can be easily trained if it is simply fixed on Krishna, just as a fort is safe when it is defended by a great general. If Krishna is placed in the fort of the mind, there will be no possibility of the enemies entering. Material education, wealth, and power will not help one control the mind. A great devotee prays, "When will I be able to think of you constantly? My mind is always dragging me about, but as soon as I am able to fix my mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, it becomes clear. When the mind is clear, it is possible to meditate on the Super Soul. The Paramatma or Super Soul is always seated within the heart along with the individual soul. The yoga system involves concentrating the mind and focusing it on the Paramatma or Super Soul seated within the heart. The previously quoted verse from Bhagavad Gita indicates that one who has conquered the mind and has overcome all attachments to non-permanent things can be absorbed in thought of the Paramatma. One so absorbed becomes free from all duality and false designations.
Jai. Thank you, Omkar. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Very nice. So Prabhupada in this chapter is talking about meditation, yoga, basically controlling of the mind. Is connecting, there's an external practice of meditating, but more if we go inwards, it's really controlling the mind and slowly bringing the mind. And Prabhupada, one point he mentioned that the basic thing is following these 4 regulative principles, and gradually, then the mind gets connected. Okay, chapter 5. Let's see. This is a small chapter, so we will finish this today. We'll try to finish this because next week we will do the last 2 chapters. Okay, so let's straight get into it. Chapter 5, Yoga and as freedom from dualities and designations. So what is the function of mind? The function of mind is to always, what does mind do? Who get that? I want this. Yes, go ahead. Manohar, you have raised hand.
Okay. This material world is a world of duality. At one moment, we are subjected to the heat of the summer season, and at the next moment, the cold of winter. Or at one moment, we're happy, and at the next moment, distressed. At one moment, honored, at the next, dishonored. In the material world of duality, it is impossible to understand one thing without understanding its opposite. It is not possible to understand what honor is unless I understand dishonor. Similarly, I cannot understand what misery is if I have never tasted happiness, nor can I understand what happiness is unless I have tasted misery. One has to transcend its dualities, but as long as his body is here, these dualities will be here also. Insofar as one strives to get out of bodily consumptions, not out of the body, but out of bodily consumptions, one has to learn to tolerate such dualities. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna informed Arjuna that the duality of distress and happiness is due to the body alone. It's like a skin disease or skin itch. Just because there is itching, one should not be mad after it passes. We should not go mad or give up our duty just because mosquitoes bite us. There are so many dualities one has to tolerate, but if the mind is fixed in Krishna consciousness, all these dualities will seem insignificant.
Yes,
How
thank you. Now, so let's pause here. I was explaining what is the function of mind. Function of mind is always to accept and to reject. Always mind will want, okay, I want this, I don't want this, I want this, I don't want this, I like this, I don't like this. I want to go there, I don't want to go there. What is all this? This is duality, right? And this is exactly what mind does. So this is the duality, is the function of the mind. What is function of the brain? The function of the brain is to think, right? To think what is right, what is wrong, think about the consequences. But does mind does that? No, mind is just desiring. Either it wants to be in this side or either it wants to be in that side. So this desiring is function of mind, and dualities is function of mind. But then the function of intelligence is to think what is right and what is wrong. And Lord Krishna has given in the human body, we have endowed this human body and that intelligence to understand what is right and what is wrong. So how to tolerate if between these dualities, what is right and what is wrong? Here we'll read further. How one can tolerate such dualities? Jnana Vijnana Tatparatma Kutasto Vijayendriya Yukta iti Uchyate Yogi Samalo Strasma Kanchana. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by the virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it is a pebble, stone, gold, as same. Jnana means theoretical knowledge and Vijnana means practical knowledge. For instance, a science student has to study theoretical scientific conceptions as well as applied science. Theoretical knowledge alone will not help. One has to be able to apply the knowledge. Similarly, in yoga, one should have not only theoretical knowledge but practical knowledge. Simply understanding I am not the body, I am the same, at the same time acting in a nonsensical way will not help. There are so many societies where members seriously discuss Vedanta philosophy while smoking and drinking and enjoying. It will not help in one only having the knowledge theoretically. Thus, knowledge must be demonstrated. Only who truly understands I am not the body will actually reduce his bodily necessities to a minimum. When one increases the demand of body while thinking I am not the body, then what uses of that knowledge? A person can only be satisfied when their jnana and vijnana are side by side. Or Prabhupada is saying, again, stretching the importance of following the regulative principles. People may be practicing so many other kind of things or, so many different paths. But at the same time, if they are not following the regulated principles, then there is no question of self-realization. There's no question of connecting to the Lord. There is no question of being regulated, which is the basis of, the yoga. Okay, so let's keep reading. We'll try to finish it. When a person is situated on a practical level of a spiritual realization, it should be understood he is actually situated in yoga. It is not that one should continue to attend yoga classes and yet remain in the same throughout his life. There must be practical realization. And what is the sign of the practical realization? The mind will be calm and quiet, no longer agitated by attractions of material world. Thus, self-control, one is not attracted by the material glitter. He sees everything pebbles, stones, and gold as same. In the material civilization, so much paraphernalia is produced just to satisfy senses. These things are produced under the banner of material advancement. He who is situated in yoga sees such paraphernalia as so much rubbish in the street. Moreover, let's read the translation only. A person is satisfied to be still further advanced when he regards all the honest well-wisher friends and enemies, the envious persons, sinners who are indifferent and impartial with the equal mind. There are different kinds of friends. There is Sruhit, who is by nature a well-wisher and is always desiring one's welfare. Mitra refers to an ordinary friend, and Udasina is one who is neutral. In this material world, someone may be well-wishers or friend, or neither friend or nor enemy, but neutral. Someone else may serve as a mediator between me and my enemies. And one in this verse is Madhyastha, one who also sees someone as pious and another as sinful according to his own calculation. But when he is situated in trance, of all these friends, enemies, and whatever ceases to exist. When one becomes actually learned, he does not see any enemy or any friend because of, in actuality, no one is enemy of one, no one, and is my friend. No one is my father, no one is my mother, etc. We all are simply living entities playing on the stage of the dress of a father, mother, children, friend, enemy, sinner, saint, etc. It is like a great drama, so many characters playing their parts. However, on the stage of person may be an enemy or whatever, but stage of all the actors are friends. Similarly, with these bodies, we are playing on the stage of material nature. We attach so many designations to one another. I may be thinking, this is my son, but in actuality, I cannot beget any son. If not, it is not possible. At the utmost, I can beget a body. It is not within any man's power to beget a living entity. Correct? Krishna says, who is the seed giving father? Krishna is the seed giving father. These all souls belong, all these other human beings, other jivas that are other living entities that are there, they all belong to Krishna, right? There's no possibility of we owning any of those because Krishna is the original source of everything. Merely by sexual intercourse, a living entity cannot beget. The living entity must be placed in the emulsification of secretions. This is the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus, all the multifruitless relationships between bodies are just so much a stage of play. One who is actually realized has actually attained yoga, no longer sees these bodily distinctions. Jai. So we just finished in time both the chapters. So in this chapter, Prabhupada is pointing to the functions of mind: to accept, to reject, to accept, to reject, right? And then further on, Prabhupada pointed that having the equal vision, because what can we accept, what can we reject if we don't even like these things? We can say, this is my friend, this is my enemy, this is my son, this is my daughter, but we don't own them. These, and when we move out of this body, we go to the other body, again those relationships change, right? So Prabhupada is pointing to an equal vision to all living entities. That's one of the values of Srimad Bhagavad Gita as well, Samadarshita. Okay, so very nice. We have gone over time today. So we'll end here. We'll quickly say our mantra. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Nanda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so we all will continue reading next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank